Innovation is the process of taking ideas from inception to impact.
Startups bring fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, disruptive technology to the table, and obviously this is of benefit to the corporates.
Emerging technologies are not cheap.
There's a lot going for us that we can use to our advantage.
If a founder cannot see the big picture, then they may be speaking so small that they may sound out like time wasters to the corporate organizations.
By collaborating with startups, corporate can tap into that creative energy.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained, but it doesn't mean you should venture without protection.
It usually will take an innovator to say, I think there's this problem, I think I can solve this problem. And when they have something on the table that the other established players can see, then you'll now start to see them approach and say, we can collaborate, we can partner.
It's all about execution and implementation,
which is typically an MVP.
Okay, so it's 3 o'clock. And I would start the webinar. Thanks everyone for joining, and welcome to today's panel webinar. My name is Odiong Akpan. I would be your host for today, and I will also be doubling as the moderator for the panel discussion. As you can see on the screen, we have what is called a Corporate Innovation Unleashed panel webinar series. This is the second, and today we'll be talking about building an innovation ecosystem, collaborating with startups. The very first one was a bit of an introduction to corporate innovation and venture building, and we had a fabulous time speaking with experienced experts about corporate innovation, their time in the corporate organizations, as well as their activities in the innovation ecosystem in Nigeria and on the continent Africa. Today also, we would be doing something similar, and I would walk you through the agenda. The welcome is what I've just done now. I've taken less time than 5 minutes, but then we'll go on to introduce the panelists. I'll introduce myself as well, and we'll talk a bit about the hosts of the panel webinar series, Ubulu Africa and Angel A. Thereafter, I will spend some time to set the tone for the conversations that we will be having with the panelists, whereby we'll do a bit of definitions or just showcasing what people say about corporate innovation and especially the innovation ecosystem that we'll be talking about today. That's supposed to do two things. One, for the listeners or the participants who are not very conversant with the topic, that should help them come up to speed with what the panelists will be talking about. And secondly, is to serve as some kind of guardrails for the conversations we'll be having, where the panelists will be sharing from their wealth of experience. After the overview, there will be the panel discussion, about 45 minutes. It's a bit of an informal conversation, so don't expect a lecture. What we have done is to bring together people who have real life experiences that they will be sharing with us. And hopefully during the process, you should note down your questions and hopefully throw them into the question and answer box on Zoom. But also at the end of the panel discussion, we'll also dedicate some time, about 15 minutes, for questions and answers, and then we would close. This panel webinar section or series is hosted and powered by Ubulu Africa and Angel A. Ubulu Africa is essentially trying to make innovation work. Ubulu Africa is a venture studio dedicated to supporting startups and corporate organizations with ideation and scaling out their innovation or innovative ideas all the way to impact. And one of the things what we're doing today is to lay emphasis on corporate innovation, because we realize that conversation has to happen and the voices have to be elevated, because there's a lot of opportunity for corporate innovation to or corporate organizations to collaborate with startups and the entire ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, for impact and to scale value. Also, Angel A, I call it Angel A sometimes, I call it Angela sometimes. regardless. But it's a community of corporate innovation enthusiasts. It started out in Nigeria, but of course it has members from all over the world. And similar to what Ubulu Africa is doing, Angel A, from a community point of view, is elevating the conversations around corporate innovation, supporting the corporate innovators, including the entrepreneurs. Those are the people who are very innovative, but they are still within the strictures of corporate organizations. So Angel A is a community. All of you are welcome to join it. And its value proposition is to pull together a community of people who will support the corporate innovation conversation. And to the meat of the matter, these are the panelists we have today. Very experienced people, very knowledgeable in the space of corporate innovation, but beyond corporate innovation, they have experience in the startup ecosystem, funding, and I would say generally innovating to make life better. So as part of introduction, I'll read out their names, but then I'll leave them to do their introduction. So the first person on the call on the panel today is Motunrayo Opayinka. I'll allow you to introduce yourself and also give a brief overview of maybe your experience and finally what you expect from this conversation today. I think it will take about 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Motunrayo.
Thank you very much, Odiong. I'll switch on my video, but I don't want to be kicked off because I think it is with the network. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Motunrayo Opayinka. I am the founder and CEO of Women Innovate, a NetTech platform for women in STEM. So I'm a woman in tech. So my background is as an SAP solution architect, and I have 20 plus years of experience, both within the public and private sector, predominantly in the oil and gas sector. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad we're having these discussions because, it is very key that corporate innovation is actually, for us startups, being in the startup ecosystem, we need more of that. We need corporate intervention for us all to work hand in hand and, provide innovative solutions and technology advancement. So it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the interesting conversations we're going to have today, and lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Charles?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Charles Uchenna Emembolu. I'm an entrepreneur. I founded the organization called Exude. Exude is basically aggregating digital skills providers whom we call training partners across emerging markets. Corporate innovation excites me because of the experience I've had around working with corporates, and also the experience I've had building businesses and working with entrepreneurship support organizations. And today, the topic that talks about building an innovation ecosystem and having them collaborate for growth, especially for emerging markets like Nigeria, or I wouldn't say scarcity, and the fact that a lot of organizations are unable to access funds. I would like to see the discussion lean towards breaking down the barriers that exist between corporate organizations and the things that startups and small businesses do. I will leave it here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles. I know you were struggling with network in the beginning part, but I think we got the gist of it. But of course, we look forward to you expanding on the things you've said, whereby you're trying to make the connection between your time as an entrepreneur and your time in the corporate organizations. Thank you. Victoria?
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Fabunmi. I'm a principal at Atlantica at the moment. Before joining Atlantica as an investor in early stage company, I used to lead investment at CC Hub, which is a technology innovation center. I've been in the tech space for about 7 years now. Prior to joining technology, I was in investment banking, focused on financial services, agriculture, and FMCG. I look forward to having an engaging conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Motunrayo. Thank you, Charles. And thank you, Victoria. I would introduce myself, and I think I talked about it earlier. I work for Ubulu Africa. I actually lead Ubulu Africa as the managing partner. But from a personal perspective, I would say I have lived and worked in the, say, technology or digital technology space or ecosystem for about 19 years, post qualification. And as a result, I would say I've been involved in either building, deploying, or managing information systems. What does that mean? That means that I am relatively familiar with the conversations, but of course, I'm no general expert. So I always rely on people like the panelists we have here to shape my thoughts as to what to do next in terms of innovation. So, but you always find me in the conversations today around corporate innovation, university industry collaboration, triple helix, which is university, industry, and government collaborations. And my ultimate objective is to use my experience, my knowledge and skills to foster those interconnections or those interfaces where activity does not happen as much like this. And I'm very happy to be here. I'll be moderating the conversations. I'll be learning as well. And what I'll be doing is just chipping in the fire to help this great group of panelists to share with us their wisdom. So thanks and welcome again. And to tee off, I put this slide always to try and contextualize the conversation in terms of definition. There's no one definition for anything, but I always just like to put things like this on the screen to help people read and kind of shape their thoughts and maybe position where they are in this conversation. Once again, as we are speaking, please go on to the top of the screen. There's a Q&A box. We expect you to throw in your questions, either directly to someone on the panel or a general question, and I'll see how I can bat it around. So, but here, this slide is talking about the definition of corporate innovation. But before going to the corporate innovation definition, I have that innovation is the process of taking ideas from inception to impact. And that's from MIT's Innovation Initiative. And then I put here two definitions of corporate innovation I like, and I'll read them out. The first one is from Plug and Play, which says, corporate innovation can be defined as the process of enterprises implementing new innovation opportunities into existing business models. I think it was Motunrayo that made the point that in the corporate sector where she worked, there was a bit of support for new business models. So that kind of definition kind of aligns with that. Another definition, which is similar but also different, is that corporate innovation is the process and activities to transform ideas from hypotheses into solutions that add value from employee, customer, business, and societal perspectives. I also like this one because it shows that innovation can go beyond, the corporate financial bottom line, or how whatever put it, and focus on other aspects, which is employee, including the societal perspectives. So just keep this in the left pocket or in the right side of your brain, pending when the conversation starts. Another slide I'll show here will be the one around avenues for corporate innovation. That is because when people hear innovation, sometimes we are forced to think about the bells and whistles of technology. Whereas innovation can be business model whereby you change how you are doing something, e.g. maybe for those of us who remember how Netflix started as a video club of sorts, and then they moved ultimately into the streaming. That's a business model innovation. With technology enablement, obviously, you can have product or service innovation where you change how your product looks or how your product is deployed innovatively, and also process innovation, where the simplest way to look at it would be going to a bank, and there are a lot of queues in the bank. However, with a bit of process innovation, you might introduce those guardrails, or you might introduce maybe service points that take care of people who need a particular service, as opposed to everybody going to the same service points. So those are things that will help, think about innovation for this conversation. And this is the parking slide. This is what our conversation today is about. Essentially building innovation ecosystems. And it's important to note that there is no one way to visualize an innovation ecosystem. What we are focusing today on is the entrepreneur or the innovator or the startup, which will be the people who are building high growth startups that use technology innovation to solve problems or to overcome challenges that we have today. And also we talk about the corporates who have a lot of, I'll say, finance, they have assets, they have customer insights, they have experienced people who have worked for them for quite a while. There is knowledge, experience. There's also the supply chains they have access to. They've been in business for a while, so they have a lot of data that you can play with, and their expertise, like I mentioned. So even though we'll be speaking about these two groups primarily, but it's important to know that the innovation ecosystem is a lot bigger than just these two groups. And so as we are speaking today, we would be touching on maybe the aspects where you talk about the people who bring in risk capital. One of our panelists is a professional out there. We have some people who probably have access to or experience with universities to speak about how universities contribute to this model. This model is from MIT, and they call it the Innovation Ecosystem Stakeholder Model. Is to help support the conversations, but it's in no way a prescriptive description of what is going on. And so I would stop here and hand over the mic to the panelists. And I would be starting with Charles. So my question to you would be, from your experience, what would you say would be the benefits of corporates collaborating with startups to kind of foster a better innovation ecosystem? And that's the question.
Okay, thank you very much. The benefits for that to happen are immense. First of all, is for us to accept the fact that at this point in time, as far as the African innovation ecosystem is concerned, the first thing I want to talk about is that there's a dichotomy of our understanding of where innovation is fostered. So what I usually like to mention is, let's take an example. When we talk about tech ecosystem, right? You tend to see that there exists an ecosystem within the corporates, and their level of interaction is quite minimal. Every day, organizations and out.
Sorry, Charles, do we give you a few seconds to switch your network? Because
innovation going.
Sorry, Charles, your network is quite patchy. Would you like to switch? Can you hear me? Charles, if you can hear me, please give me feedback. All right. Let's give Charles some time to reconfigure. Motunrayo, I'll come to you. I hope you're ready for us. A similar question. Just can you please, from your experience, share what you think? So you have started talking about it anyway. What you think would be the benefits and how best the benefits of collaborating between startups and the corporate organizations?
Sure. Thank you very much, Odiong. Certainly, we know that building and nurturing an innovative ecosystem through collaboration with corporates and startups can, be extremely beneficial both to the corporates and obviously the broader economy in any society in Nigeria. At this case, there are immense benefits that come to that. Certainly, corporates have access to fresh ideas and disruptions from the startups. They are the ones that come up with the ideas. The startups bring fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, disruptive technologies, to the table. And obviously, this is of benefit to the corporates. So by collaborating with startups, corporate can tap into that creative energy to, further develop new products and services and business models that can lead to, huge competitive advantage. So it's a win-win. It's a win for the corporates, In addition to that, corporates, stand to gain enhanced flexibility and agility from collaborating with startups, because startups are known for that, how to respond to market trends and customer demands. They're good at that. Collaborating with startups, will infuse these traits into the corporate culture, helping them, adapt to changing market conditions more effectively. We've seen, today's market environment or business environment, if you like, you cannot exist successfully if you're not agile. So we're seeing agility is a key attribute for any business to have to survive. So, corporates have that to learn and pick up from startups, So there's immense benefit that comes from collaboration. I'd say collaboration in today's time is the new oil, as in, for me, it is a guaranteed recipe for growth, as a startup founder. 80% of our growth really has stemmed from collaboration. And we need to see more of that. We need more corporate involvement. The corporate environment needs to, cultivate the culture of innovation, which they can only learn, from the startups, inspiring their employees to think creatively, to take calculated risk and explore new ways of doing things. All of this are to be learned from the startup. So there's a lot, to begin on the corporate side, and also for the economy as well. And in terms of the challenges that we still continue to face, that involvement has to, increase. We need to see more investment opportunities coming in. The corporates have the money, startups don't. So everyone has what they're offering, and coming together, brings, immense and huge benefits. And corporates have to be known to support local entrepreneurship. It is in fact, it's an economic indicator. Collaborating with the local startups contribute to the growth, of that local entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we need more of that to boost the economic development, create more job opportunities, and attract talent to the region. So, innovation is something that needs to be fostered, more so by the corporate, as well as government. The challenges we face in the startup ecosystem beyond funding, we have, one of the deterrents to general innovation are our infrastructures. We need the corporate ecosystem involvement to continually invest in infrastructure, bring the capital in terms of funding, and we'll see, an economic growth that can anytime be gauged against what is happening in the Western and developed world. In preparing for this, I was looking at the innovation ecosystem landscape here in Nigeria, the corporate innovation landscape. And that's been growing steadily, but we can still do better and do more, because we've had factors that have driven, this steady growth. Things that have worked to our advantage, for example, our large population, the increased technological adoption that we continue to see, and obviously a growing number of more startups and tech hubs, in Nigeria. So, I mean, there's a lot going for us that we can use to our advantage, and it will always be a win-win. We need more corporate intervention, especially in the entrepreneur and startup ecosystem, to boost more innovation within our society. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Motunrayo. Thank you. And thank you especially because of how you try to wrap it up with real life examples in this context. It's important because, yes, some of our members of our audience will probably want to say, okay, if they should understand what we are saying, let us bring it to real life. And that's the thing of my question to Victoria. I know beyond the two circled groups, Victoria, you work also in a third group, which is the risk capital group. And so I would ask you to, maybe from your experience, before I even go into that, I didn't ask if you guys agree with or you like or you don't like this model, because I don't want to take for granted that, I put up a model on the screen and it's easy to talk through or talk about. So Victoria, perhaps you could comment on the model and then share from your experience how these partnerships can work, especially with the two circled groups.
Thanks, Odiong. I think that on a very high level, when you think about innovation and how it will apply to society, all these models have to collaborate for innovation to actually work. I think that innovation actually is a system, right? And it creates the required infrastructure for change or for any participant here to create a better society. And what do I mean by that? Corporates have existed for eons of years, and perhaps they are stuck in providing solutions in a particular way that has worked. But we know several theories have allowed us, or research has allowed us see that in frontier markets like Africa, we have a huge ton of non-consumers, which these corporates, regardless of the solution that they are providing, are unable to reach at any given point in time. So that's where startups come in. Startups are able to provide the enabling environment where innovators can now test solutions or products or even models that would help capture or create new markets. I think that the universities also play a strong role here, where they provide an environment for people who are interested in creating solutions to come out of. So whether it's in the sense of just providing education that enlightens people's minds and they're thinking about how are we solving problems that have existed for a very long time, or even themselves being active participants and having these test beds or R&D centers within the institutions that allow students come through, be inspired and go on to join the hubs. And then governments play the role of creating enabling environment. Even if they don't do anything around funding or infrastructure, which is where private sector can come in, the fact that there is an enabling environment, there are policies that would stimulate the right actions and decisions that would enable infrastructure or systems to continue to thrive, makes them key players. So this model that you've put up, I don't know that a sustainable or a functioning innovation ecosystem can exist without this. Providers of risk capital will only be excited to deploy capital if they know that there are people who are excited about change and this change is scalable, if they know that there's a strong distribution network, which corporates play a very pivotal role in, to ensure that whatever solution or model is able to get to the last mile. And if they know that there's an enabling environment and access to talent or people who will continue to go through this funnel to ensure that more solutions and and product or even infrastructure is created to sustain whatever system exists, I think that you will always find that risk capital will always flow to those types of solutions or to those types of ecosystem. So I'll stop there. I'm aligned with what you've put up. I don't think any innovation ecosystem would exist barring any of the stakeholders here on the slide.
All right. Thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you. Helpful. Very helpful. And thanks for helping to share your thoughts on all the elements of the ring. We'll come back to you on that. Charles, are you back? Charles, please indicate. Are you back? Are you ready?
Yes.
You're not back, oh.
I am back. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. So
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I know you struggled with the network earlier, but I'm just going to give you a chance to recap, but also I would give a combo question so that you can use the time to answer both. The first question to you, which you were asked, was about the benefits of this collaboration that we keep talking about, the startups and the corporates, what the benefits are. But also, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Victoria. What you think about this model, and in the context of our conversation, whereby we are trying to foster those connections between every player of the ecosystem or the innovation ecosystem. How best do you see that happening? So first, the benefits. Second, the how best it can happen with everyone in the innovation ecosystem.
Okay, thank you very much. Speaking to the benefits, I think one of the benefits I have already experienced, because I have just partnered with a corporate organization to improve my internet access. So that is one. It means that if I'm an entrepreneur, and it means that there are capabilities that corporate organizations have that if startups or entrepreneurs lean on, can enable them to accelerate innovation and vice versa. Because one thing that startups have is agility, and they do have fresh perspectives, which comes from not having biases. If you put, when we founded the hub within the University of Nigeria, one of the things I found out is that the young people there, the young talented undergraduates or graduates, could build castles in the air without thinking of whether it could work or not. And there's a wonderful perspective there, because if you give that same opportunity to someone who had spent 20 years in the corporate, he will see only all the risks and how that could be shut down. If you make a proper mix of that within the right mindset, you could find a lot of innovation being accelerated. Then the other part is that emerging technologies are not cheap. And sometimes it is very difficult. I think my colleague has talked about risk capital, but there's also a limit to how much of that risk can be deployed, especially in emerging markets like Africa. But when you have corporates back it reduces the level of risk, especially with regards to resources that have to be deployed and the recovery from sin. Not to talk about the access to markets, platforms. For instance, if I mention Flutterwave here, we wouldn't have had the level of success without plugging into existing systems like banks. The other thing I must try to mention is the experience level, the human resource or human capital that exists within big corporates, because they can pay good money, they provide stability, they provide access to training. It is not a one that they then have quite a lot of resources of people together under one umbrella that can support a startup or an initiative to gain the traction that it requires. Then if you want to also talk about diversification of revenue streams, there is a possibility. Startups typically will try to build with focus, kind of focus their attention in the early days to solving a very small step problems or one very well before they begin to scale or begin to pivot into other areas. When you bring in corporates into that mix, they can very easily.
So Charles, your network is a bit patchy again, and the past you've been saying something very important. So if you don't mind, you need to track back about 30 seconds or 60 seconds. Charles, if you can hear me. No.
Of customers, different use solutions.
Sorry, Charles.
For value.
Sorry,
and
Charles.
that can then bring a lot of revenue streams, not just for the for
sorry,
the
Charles. Sorry, Charles. I'll take you back. Oh. Your network did that thing again. And you were saying something very interesting. Can you hear me, Charles? Hello, Charles. Oh no, he's left. Okay. Pending when he comes back. He's been knocked off. Motunrayo, I'll come to you. I'll come back to you. And Charles, please, if you can hear me, put a pin on that. We'll come back to you soon. So Motunrayo, the question I'll have for you, and in this round, I guess we will now start coming to real life examples. And the real life examples will essentially be you sharing from your experience. I know you had said that most of the work you do in Women Innovate, or just in most of the, I'll say your organization, or with the work you do, is built on partnerships. And I know what we are talking about today is heavy on partnerships. So I would like you to share with your audience, how the ecosystem that you work in is fostered by those partnerships, this innovation ecosystem that you experience or you benefit from. How does it work? What did you do that you would say is best practice that one can learn from, and what mistakes perhaps have you made in the process that you want people to learn from as well?
Thanks, Odiong. Now, leading on personal experience, like I said earlier, the traction we have to date has been 80% predominantly based on collaboration and partnership. And this is strategic collaboration and partnerships. So we're an tech platform. Women Innovate was birthed from my personal experience as a woman in tech. And what we are doing is closing the gender gap for women in STEM sectors for three things, really. Uptake and participation, innovation, as we're talking about, and inclusion. So those are the three things that's driving what we do. To have more women in the STEM sectors, more girls taking on STEM, as their area of focus. So number one, our vision to start off with is to make sure that we're delivering on those things. And our means of delivering on that is, to make do on that promise has been fulfilled mainly by our partnerships. We want to be able to offer, a full range beneficial material to our women. And we have partnerships with the likes of Microsoft, Cisco, corporate players for, giving them internship opportunities to practice whatever they've learned in terms of skills, and, private players to deliver skills that are relevant to them, as well as, platforms that will also enable them and provide them with jobs. So, for example, we have a partnership with Indeed so that people can also leverage on accessing, jobs that are barrierless. So we're saying opportunities that are not defined by barriers. I could be a full stack engineer here, and I can take on a project, say in like Europe or the Asia. So those are the things we're doing, and we could only have been able to deliver, well, if you like, successfully on that. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the partnerships that we have. So we defined, strategically what we're looking to achieve. They say one can do so much, together we can do more. And there's no point reinventing the wheel. So that is what, we take into consideration and look at what we require and, approach partnership and collaboration in that stead. Okay. So for us, 80% of what we do is based on collaboration and partnership. And I don't even know how one could exist in today's time or today's business environment without that. Now, again, I leverage on my network, given my background. So my background is in tech. I'm an SAP solution architect. So from that angle, I'm getting in all the OEMs that I've had relationship with, say, guys, you can do this, we need this, let's do this together. Like Victoria mentioned earlier on, we have people that require these things. We have the consumers on one end. So it's coming up with the innovative ideas on how we can deliver to them. And that's where, our partnerships and collaboration, has helped us in that stead. And we still continue to do that. We always encourage it. It's what we do at the core of what we deliver to our customers. So I'll leave it here. Hopefully Charles is back now.
Yeah. Charles, okay, before I come to Charles, thank you very much. I would like to remind the audience that you can throw in your questions in the Q&A box. I see there's already a question from George Achibong. We would answer that question on the call here. But Charles, just I want to go to Victoria real quick, because not real quick, but I'm interested in hearing her perspective of this same question that I asked Motunrayo, which was, from your experience, and now we are now coming to the brass tacks, how has this, I'll say, partnership with startups, corporate startup partnership, worked from your experience, and how have you seen it not work in terms of you sharing with us real life experiences in this, I'll say, Nigerian or African ecosystem, so that we, the listeners and the participants, can, take home, real life experiences or lessons.
Thanks, Odiong. So, because our ecosystem is still nascent, I think there's still a learning curve in terms of stakeholder engagement and integration. And what do I mean by that? There is some sort of partnership or corporate innovation happening, but I think that there's still quite a journey from an ecosystem perspective in terms of how fully integrated we are and where we think that it should go, such that the growth we're anticipating is exponential. Today, what we've seen is the number of non-consumers, especially for frontier markets. We use Nigeria as a good case, significantly outweighed the number of consumers. Pick any sector. For example, if you pick fintech, when any startup is giving you a statistics, they'll pick an EFINA statistic and they'll talk about the number of people who don't have access to financial services, so unbanked or underbanked. And just because of how large the market is, or the problem is, there's an opportunity for people to come in and say, okay, let's innovate around this. What kind of solution can we create to reach the banks, the unbanked or underbanked? And this is with us having a plethora of banks, a number of banks existing already. In recent times, we've also had new entrants into the financial institution, particularly banking, who are looking to leverage technology to still reach or to still solve the same problem. And the problem is still not solved, right? So I will put a flip on it. I know that the best state of the world is everyone is working together, but however, oftentimes it doesn't happen as quickly as possible. It usually will take an innovator to say, I think there's this problem. I think I can solve this problem. And when they have something on the table, which is typically an MVP, that the other established players can see for a fact is solving problems they've always thought about, then you'll now start to see them approach and say, we can collaborate, we can partner. And sometimes we can build it internally, working together with the startups on the outside. I think 3 years ago, we had this corporate innovation. First, we did one with First Bank. This is while I was at CCF, and another one we did with Stanbic IBTC. And the goal was to bring fintechs together. So the goal was to bring fintechs together, solving different or varied problems, which the bank as a holding company, both of them were holding companies at the time, were solving. And at the end of the day, they selected the top 3. In Stanbic's case, for example, it was Flutterwave that was selected, a company called Yocha, and I forget the third one. Now, Yocha made top 3 because if anyone knows Stanbic is very strong with wealth management. But they were doing very well on the corporate side, which is serving other institutions, but not very well on the retail side. There were other people who were playing on the retail side. They were doing much better. Think about Meristem, think about ARM in terms of being able to sell asset management services or products to them. And it kind of informed their decision to pick the top 3 or the top 5. What are the areas we need innovation around, and who are the startups we can actually work with, see how they are thinking about approaching the market, and then help them to take product to market. So I've seen it work in those cases. But right now, and the jury is out of there, I'm sure everyone has different perspective. I'm actually on the part of creating new markets. So startups coming and thinking, this is a solution to a problem. This is how we want to approach it. Because they're still young, small, as Charles has said, they're much nimbler, they're much agile. They're able to make mistakes and fail. A large corporate doesn't have so much opportunities for failure. And even if they decided to ring fence, the amount of budget that will go through that will perhaps cause their shareholders to start to scratch their head or cause an uproar. With startups, you don't get that much of an uproar because that's what they are. They are allowed to experiment and make mistakes and take products to people and get feedback very quickly and iterate. So that's the journey. It should ideally be that working hand in hand, but I don't think we're there. I'm happy that other stakeholders are working. The entrepreneur support organizations today are getting stronger, getting better in terms of how to provide support and bring together the other units to help these startups. But because we're still nascent, I think that the trend that we'll continue to see will be startups today figuring out what a problem is, or figuring out what a solution or business model to solve a non-consumption problem is. And then as they've been able to prove that that solution they've come up with can work, corporates coming on board either as investors, strategic investors to invest in the solution or acquire the startups in total, or as a distribution channel. We see companies like MTN, Airtel, the big telcos providing being a solid distribution channel for technology startup companies, whether it's in fintech, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare. But we need them to start. We need startups now, or we need innovators to start churning out the solution such that corporates can find a good fit. As we go along and as the curve evolves, we'll begin to see it happening internally. I think it's happening internally now. Most of the corporates have innovation units embedded. Axel recently launched their own innovation unit where it's somewhat of a sandbox for startups to come and test out their solution, which they will take up. But the more solutions or the more problems you're solving through entrepreneurs or through startups, the more we find that there will be opportunity for corporates to be a good distribution partner or good stakeholder into the future. Thanks, Odiong. That was a mouthful, but yeah.
But it's very helpful and I'll thank you too, because just like I said to Motunrayo, what I always say is that the vivid examples you give are always very helpful to drive the message home. And I guess that's how I'll go into Charles's segment. Charles, are you there now? Are you back? Can you hear us? Charles, please confirm you can hear.
I have to innovate around this.
Aha, great.
I think I can. I can hear you though. I hear you loud.
Cast and bind.
The question is whether you can hear me, because I've heard the last several minutes.
Okay. So I was just saying you should cast and bind all the village people that might want to come in the way of you giving us your nuggets of wisdom. Can you hear me? Can you hear me real time? Did you hear what I said?
I can hear you.
Okay, there's a bit of a lag, it seems. But okay, I had asked Motunrayo and Victoria similar kinds of questions, and I'll ask you on the same path to draw from your experience what you think works and what you think does not work, in the whole startup and corporate innovation partnership in the context of the innovation ecosystem. So I'm not asking you to isolate it only to those two, but the relationship with those two, which is what we are interested in, can be spoken about from your experience, and then you can scale it out to the entire ecosystem. What works and what has not worked that you think we can learn from.
Okay, this is hoping you can hear me loud and clear. I just want to say that one thing that doesn't work is where corporates play the role of benefactor to the startup and innovation ecosystems. Most of the relationships you see, typically you have a corporate, they organize hackathons, and you have the startup ecosystems, the young founders, the innovation systems come together, and there's a winner. What should happen more is where both sides of the divide kind of see this as some mutually beneficial exercise that will enable them to derive quality and value from the engagement. And if that is adapted or adopted, what you will tend to see is that a lot more thinking will be put into the process. For instance, that funding will stop coming more from a CSR perspective and start becoming more from a research or product development side of things. And typically, there's more money there, there's more intentionality, there's more deliberate and focused approach when an organization like a corporate decides to build out. We saw a little bit of that post-COVID, when there was need for a lot of solutions, when there are limited interactions, border transaction issues. We saw a lot. I personally saw a lot of deliberateness with the corporates engaging founders and startups and innovators to try to find solutions that were homebred, that could cater to their customers or to their internal operations. And I think that's one thing that should happen more often. Hope I've tried to do justice to that. And this is hoping that you heard me loud and clear.
This was a lot better. What did you borrow? Did you borrow a new network, or How did you
I
solve?
stopped talking to the CSR. I stopped talking to the CSR budget holder. I went to the product dev.
That's innovation at play. Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much. We'll start winding down, and I would ask, because with these so-called talk shops, some people walk away saying, okay, so what do I take from this? What actionable steps can I take after listening to these folks? So my question, and I'll start with Motunrayo, would be, we've talked a lot about how the benefits of the corporate and startup relationship, what the benefits could be. But then I'm a startup founder. Probably I just have a fintech or a health tech. How do I carry out this, or how do I approach this? Because Charles just made the point that there's a power imbalance of sorts, where it seems like one is a benefactor, and so I have to go cap in hand. Whereas there is a bit of a mutually beneficial relationship we can foster and build. So to summarize the question, and I'll probably throw the question to all of you, but Motunrayo first. How can I, as a startup founder, in your case, and I'm drawing from your experience as from Innovate, for example, how would you approach a corporate and start the conversation, hoping that it would, or rather with the chance that it would be very beneficial to both of you?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Odiong. I think to start up as an entrepreneur, 80% of your time should be on networking, right? So you need to put yourself out there and your brand. Networking events where you meet people. Like we've said, the startups are the ones with the ideas. I like what Charles said about, the perspective, the mindset change, need for that change for the, corporates looking at it as, not from the CSR perspective, but from a research and development perspective. So we come up with the ideas and engage. So, for example, what we do, identify potential collaborators or partners, if you like, that is aligned to what we do and where we want to get to, and reach out to them. So we then, once we've reached out, engage them. This is what we're bringing. This is what we're thinking. Let's sit down together and, co-ideate, if you like, and see, obviously the value we're bringing on board to you and also to the beneficiaries of what we're looking to proffer. And we get together and, have an MOU in place based on agreement on the expected outcomes that are beneficial to both parties. And we get them on board that way. That has always been what we do. And a lot of that is, in Nigeria, it's more beyond the value of what you're putting forward. It's more relationship. So relationships have to be built through networking and, avenues that will bring you in contact with this potential partners or collaborators. So, in my personal experience, that's always been, and like I said, based on my background anyway, leveraging on my network, platforms that can showcase what we do and bring us in contact with those that can actually also add value to us as we are adding value to them. So that's been our story. That's always been our story. And for me, I put so much value into that aspect of networking for my brand building and also engaging the relevant stakeholders that we require for our growth. Thank you, Odiong.
All right, thank you very much. Victoria, I'll pass the mic to you. Similar question, probably more juiced up because I'll add the corporate side. So Motunrayo has talked about the entrepreneur side of trying to work around that power imbalance. So I'll ask you to answer either one or the other or both. How best can we leave this place and foster this relationship between the startup community or the innovators community and the corporates, noting that, like Charles has said, there is a bit of a power imbalance?
I think that the power imbalance will not change overnight. I think there are certain things that has to happen for us to start to see balance. It will always be there. I wouldn't say always, but in the short term, we'll continue to see imbalance. And why do I say that? To the extent that the corporates don't think there is anything that will disrupt the status quo, they'll continue to think of innovation as CSR. I'll use the Netflix and Blockbuster example. At some point in this life, Blockbuster probably would have acquired Netflix, but somebody sitting somewhere just could not see that there was innovation or disruption that was able to unseat them, right? But because the other stakeholders in this framework were working, government was working, risk capital, who are the investors or financiers, were working, and then the investors themselves were bullish enough to see the future and what they were creating. They stayed the course. Eventually, Blockbuster ceased to exist. Netflix, I'm sure everyone has heard of the company called Netflix. And you can go on and on and on in terms of example. An industry that I think is near to my heart today is insurance. Insurance penetration on the continent is still very low. In Nigeria, it's only 3%. I think there's something happening there, but it still hasn't caught on. Because in my opinion, there is a overarching belief that insurance is sold, and the biggest competition, especially on the continent, is with Jesus Christ, which is not a lie. Go and sell insurance to an average person. Person will say, no, I'm secured. I'm covered by the blood. Nothing can happen to me. Until they won't buy insurance. But how are you finding entrepreneurs who perhaps have a deep understanding of what the problem is, have experienced it, and are willing to test out solutions that would disrupt the current status quo, or that would wake people up enough to think of how come we never saw that, or how did we not see that? Then we begin to see corporates engaging startups at a pace where I think that you can solve a problem for me, and this is not just CSR, but we are going to be ensuring that we're creating wealth for shareholders, or even for entire stakeholders into the future, because we're able to see ahead of the curve. Till that starts to happen, it will always be, we're already making billions of dollars. We don't see anything that would evolve in the near term or significantly disrupt what we're doing. And so it will continue to be a beauty parade. Okay, let's see who's the hottest thing here. Okay, what are they doing? How quickly can they get to XYZ? It's nothing there, they'll leave it. So I think that's the charge, the approach. What Motunrayo has said is networking and consistent engagement by entrepreneur support organizations. So yes, the entrepreneurs have a role to play, but I think that the networks and the ESOs have a more role to play in terms of how are you positioning leadership in this corporate, especially corporates that have been around for 50 years, 100 years, and asking them to think about what the next generation of consumers will look like and how these entrepreneurs or solutions they're creating will be able to serve them. I think in the interim, that's a good model that would work. But till we start to see challenger companies, so they call them challenger banks, but challenger innovators, especially in frontier markets, coming up and taking market share from corporates, it'll still be a conversation on we're trying to help you, because they are not yet at a place where they see these companies with the capacity to unseat them. That's my current perspective, but I stand to be educated by any other person on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Your current perspective is very rich, if I must say. So thank you for that. And Charles, I always have to double check. Are you okay? Are you ready? If you are, please give me a signal. The question was, I am a startup, perhaps a fintech or a health tech or insurtech startup. And the question to you is for you to advise me on how best to approach this relationship with the corporate organization to give me a better chance at successful partnership.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first thing I would say is if you're a startup founder and you don't have corporate experience, get it on board. It could be from having an advisory board member or a mentor who understands the corporate language. I have had interactions with quite a lot of young founders, limited work experience, but super smart, super innovative, and they just don't even speak the language because there's a language. Of course, we mostly speak English in this part of the world, but that corporate language, if you remember, you're selling what you're doing. And to sell it, you may have to speak my language. And this is me wearing a corporate hat now. That is one. Two, it is also very important that you realize that you do not think small. You need to understand the scale. Several years ago, almost a decade ago, I was managing a project between two corporates. One is a telco, one is an FSI. And the FSI came into the room feeling all strong and powerful. But when the telco guys revealed out the number of customers that they had to serve, and the contest here was marketing budget and who own marketing concepts and engagement, I realized that the FSI was way too small and thinking too small in terms of the sheer size and reach of the telcos. That can also play out with startups. If a founder cannot see the big picture, and that's where the advisors or the mentors can help, then they may be speaking so small that they may sound out like time wasters to the corporate organizations. The third thing I would like to mention is leverage ecosystem engagements. There are some battlefronts that you need alliances. We can all see what's playing out with ECOWAS in the West African sub-region. I don't want to say if I'm in support or not in support, but I will just say that sometimes you do need alliances, and that's where organizations that are network memberships, ecosystem support organizations like ISM play a role, because I know that even across the continent, sometimes when you want to achieve something and it's in French or Swahili, going through the ecosystem can provide you a leeway to understand the mindset. The same way organizations, if you're let's say you're in Nasarawa and you're building a startup, but how your startup can leverage corporates to grow, to scale, or to access customers. It may be wise to go through the ecosystem, establish the right kind of partnerships or collaboration, and get a foot in the door. One of the ones that we tend to shy away from a lot is the government. In the last couple of years, I've had interactions with governments, especially at the national level, and I find out that they can be more of an ally if you position your conversation in the right manner. Nigeria specifically has played a role in the way and manner of approach for a lot of us, and maybe even most of Africa. We tend to come into conversations in a combative manner. And sometimes instead of asking for what we want, we tend to when we get access to speak, we start attacking or complaining. The time is limited. People don't like negative energy. So I'd say when those opportunities come up, even if it's in proposal writing or in panels such as this, come up with your most positive mindset. Make your ask very clear and ignore what you may have as a bias of what the government or other key stakeholders can do. Even the universities, I have had interactions that come out very positive when you approach professors or researchers from a less condescending point of view. They may not be able to write programs as fast as you can do. They may not know all the terrain or the landscape as much as you do. but they are professionals, mostly professionals in their own right. So if you approach them from a position of collaboration, understanding, and seeking the assistance and support that you need to achieve what you want, then you will get it. You will most likely get it. I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Victor, and thank you, Motunrayo. I think this is almost at the end. We'll open it up for Q&A, and then we'll allow you with your last, I'll say your last suggestions or recommendations. So I'll go quickly to the Q&A box. We have less than 15 minutes to go, and so I will read and pass the questions to each panelist as is concerned. Please take about 1 minute or 90 seconds, at most 2 minutes to respond. And this one is from Georgia Chibong. Motunrayo has indicated that she will take it. It says, most corporate organizations have staff that are resistant to change. When an organization collaborates with a startup, how do you as a startup deal with that resistance or change inertia within that organization? Motunrayo.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thanks for that. Resistance. So I think it's onus onto the corporate body to engage in some kind of organizational change management in terms of whatever is going on. The employees all have to buy in. If it's been communicated well, you have that buy-in. So there's no point you coming in and then having the resistance from them. So it all boils down to the internal runnings in that organization itself. However, that's what you're faced with, and you have to deal with it. So again, is how to sensitize them, to let them know you're not a threat to them. They are valuable just as what you're bringing in, and really honest in working together. So, people, what you don't know, you tend to have your guard up against, or, knowledge brings, what's the word I'm looking for? So basically it's bringing them on board and, carrying them along, working with them, which obviously you'd have to manage. So with the corporate support internally for them to sort out their, whatever is going on within the organization, you also come with a skill where you can manage them, and at the end of the day is ensuring that everybody works together collaboratively towards the objective that you're looking to achieve. So it's people management, both from the corporate standstill and also from you as the startup. So it's all about making people comfortable and alleviating what fears or threats they think you might come with. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's insightful. The next one is for Victoria, and I'll read. Thanks, guys. It's from Christian Agudelo. Thanks, guys. I will lead a program for the UNDP about African innovation. The goal is to enhance this ecosystem. Which are for you, all of you, the most critical and relevant issues to be solved? Which would be of order of relevance? And also any tip, recommendation to build this network? Okay. So Victoria, you volunteered to do that. Can you do that quickly? Because I know it's a very long question, and if you can't, we can take it offline. But please go ahead.
So when he says which is the most important, I think all of them are equally important. But in terms of trying to figure out which should be solved, and maybe this is my founder hat speaking, I think that we don't have enough capital. There's work going on the policy side. If you look at the hotbeds on the continent, everyone is coming up with a startup bill to support the innovation ecosystem. It's not all the way there, but there's something happening in terms of system or infrastructure being built. Every day, new entrepreneurs are being born. And we won't say we have enough universities, but we are seeing a lot of work happening on the HEI side, higher education side, with them adopting innovation and wanting to be active participants in the ecosystem. Where we have perhaps a drag is enough risk capital to support the work that's happening. This year with the winter, so we call it funding winter, the amount of funding that's gone into the ecosystem has reduced. And then we're beginning to see larger tickets going into what quote unquote air bubbles people will call winners. But we want to see DFIs actively funding. So UNDP, I know there was a fund they were working on. I don't know if it's live and how mainstream it's come, but we would like to see DFIs actively participating, so we know that there's somebody playing that role. We also like to see corporate financial institutions actively playing a role. Is there a role that the United Nations can play in terms of policy around funding? We have trillions of naira sitting on the pension side, which we think can be catalytic to this ecosystem. What would be the best approach? And we don't think it's just going to be one stakeholder or the stakeholders in the innovation ecosystem trying to lobby for it. We think it's a all hands on deck approach. So that's my thought. There's quite a handsome amount of work already going on. But if everything should crystallize, do we have the funding to support? So I think that's something we should think about. In terms of collaboration or recommendation on how to build the ecosystem, I am the networks. I think there's a number of networks that actively exist across the board. There's so many of them. So a low-hanging fruit would be to know where these networks are and how can you, as an organization, or plug into each of these networks before thinking of creating something new. I think that it might be fragmented, but then plugging into them, and then once you have an understanding of what each network is trying to solve, then finding a way to now bring them together. You could be that body that does that. That would be my thoughts around that. I hope that answers the question, Christian.
Yeah,
thanks, Odi.
Helpful. And just to let the participants know that these sessions are recorded, will be published on YouTube. But beyond that, we would also extract most of the insights and publish material that is easily readable and also distributable. So, but thank you, Victoria, for the response. I'll go to the next one, which is from Susan Otieno. It's not a question, but a comment. And thank you for that comment. It says, in the previous corporate innovation session, one of the panelists mentioned that Toyota has a research center at MIT, a great example of collaboration, especially for today's conversation on building an innovation ecosystem. It will be amazing to see similar situation in Africa, possibly having small test beds or R&D centers like Victoria mentioned. Yes, I agree with that, and I'm sure most of the panelists agree with that. We would hopefully incorporate it in the next response. And this one, I'll throw it to Charles. It's from Thank God Egbe. It says, so we have talked about the value of partnerships and the benefits of collaboration. How can a startup seeking to collaborate with a corporate manage the possibility of idea hijacking by some of these corporates? If you can help answer in about 2 minutes, we have 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, I would start by saying that nothing ventured, nothing gained, but it doesn't mean you should venture without protection. I also know that things like NDAs and stuff are very difficult, especially when a young founder or a non-proven startup is trying to engage with the corporates. But I had mentioned earlier a few ways to do that. There are certain kinds of people you put into that conversation, either as advisors or as co-owners or as board members of your organization, and it reduces the possibility of that happening. Recently, we had a case where somebody had done some IP. A bank looked at the IP, said they didn't need it, went ahead and used it. Just the mere mention of somebody or a call from somebody reduced got them back on the table, and they immediately started negotiating. You can't, it happens everywhere. It doesn't happen just in Nigeria. And I would say that the startup structures, the founding engagements, the kind of documentation and the approach is very important. Try not to do most things verbal or informal. Try to have proof that you are actually having those communication. When they are difficult, use people that can help you get in the door, which is where partnerships can help, which is also where networking is very, very important, because if you network, you will typically always find somebody, and be very vocal about what you're trying to do. I hear some people that will say, I have an idea, but I don't want to share it yet with you. You have to share that idea. It's all about execution and implementation. Ideas are a dime a dozen. So thank God, thank you very much for that question.
Okay,
there's no simple answer to it.
Don't go yet, please. I have one more question on Thank God, which just is tied to that first one, which is, what strategies would you recommend to corporates to increase the drive or awareness for corporate development within their organizations, such that startups can be even bettered within their organizations?
Okay, just to finish up on the first one, it seems like I trivialized a little bit about documentation. There are also trademarks, there are also IPs that you can do. Many of them you can get a lot of support. There are government organizations and people that can help you. There's also lawyers that can do that quite cheap. And then there are incubators and accelerators that can guide you if what you're doing is something that you can easily trademark or put an IP around. To the second question, which is corporates having awareness to build or bet startups within their organization. It's already happening. I think that first of all, I want to talk about the policy side of things. The Nigerian Startup Act is quite enabling, and it has provisions that speak to this direction, where not just will they benefit from the solutions, but they can also get breaks, capital repatriation, exemption, tax exemptions for participating in this or betting startups or participating in innovative activities. It is also important to say that if you realize that every bank, most corporates, whether in the public or private sector, are currently seeking one form of innovative project or the other, it is now left for the players to structure it right. It started with everybody wanting to do a hackathon. Now, some of them are creating organizations within and running it much the same way they run their corporate organizations, to some of them beginning to co-create those programs. And one way to do that is to keep putting them on the table in conversations like this. The second way is to do what we call quality monitoring and evaluation of programs that have worked and showcase it. People like Dr. Odiong here can begin to publish, those the outcomes of the work that has been done, especially in our clients, because they then reinforce the behavior of being able to repeat what has worked and also avoid those that have not worked. So if we do a little bit of this and continue the education one-on-ones, today I had a meeting earlier this morning, and one of the things I learned is that sometimes we think that they know, the people we're engaging, they know because they are smart in their areas of work. And they act along, they nod, they act like they know, but they don't. And if you put them on the spot, they will create confusion. They can create an opportunity for there to be quarrel or, but if you find time and do one-on-one education and tell them what is not working, what is working, give examples, we will convert more to the side that will enable these to become mainstays within corporates. And we will see phenomenal growth within our ecosystem, because the corporates hold the key for capital, for access to markets, for integration, system integrations, and to credibility that we need at scale to build out the ecosystem today and for the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Charles. And that's been a very rich response, and I hope Thank God has been satisfied. unfortunately, we've gone past the closing time, which was 4:30. I'll crave your indulgence to give us 2 more minutes to close out this conversation, and I'll go around the panelists just for you to know them. And so I would ask you, are you a morning person or you are a night person? So that when people find you, they also know when to engage with you. I'll start with you, Motunrayo. Morning or night?
Morning, Odiong.
Charles?
I'm a morning person.
You, Charles?
I'm a midnight person.
Victoria?
I'm a night person.
Be a night. I'm not a morning, so I don't know what I am. But thank you very much for joining the conversation, and thank you for the nuggets of wisdom you've shared with us. It's our expectation that you will come back someday to participate in other conversations or other themes. Thank you for all our participants and attendees. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. And this will be published on YouTube. And eventually we would also send out a communique so that we can get the nuggets in bite-sized form and readable form. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
This session of Corporate Innovation Unleashed webinar is powered by Ubulu Africa. Join us next time for a more elaborate and inclusive conversation around the world of business, innovation, and tech collaborations.